actually reminding 18 to 39-year-olds that they're going to still have to wait to book, because you can technically still walk into some centres, although we've seen queues of up to things like 5 hours, or like where I was earlier, people being turned away. But people can actually get their jab over 18s from this week, as long as it's 3 months since their second dose. We know that this is coming because of this concern over this new variant of coronavirus, the Omicron cases. Boris Johnson saying that is doubling every 2 days. And there has been concern over the past few weeks that we could see, some scientists saying that we could see a wave of infections if we don't go further than the Plan B measures that are being voted on in Parliament tomorrow. But Boris Johnson saying about this vaccine rollout that if we don't have an emergency booster campaign to tackle or to try to curb the Omicron variant, that the NHS could become overwhelmed. And in a quote that was quite poignant and I think stuck with many people yesterday, he said we could see very many deaths. But it's worth noting as well that there comes concern amid a sort of wider healthcare setting, if you like, because Boris Johnson said that some other medical appointments will need to be postponed until the next year to focus on this booster campaign.
Amelia, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. That's Amelia Harper there, our East of England reporter, who's been out in Stevenage today, seeing vaccination centres. And we are expecting to hear from the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid. He's due to speak in Parliament in the next couple of minutes or so. And we'll, of course, bring you that live here on GB News. Now, let's move on to kind of politics, election politics, because yesterday marked 2 years since the 2019 general election. My word, it's only 2 years. Feels like a lot longer, doesn't it? The election, of course, saw Boris Johnson sweep to a thumping majority, with the Conservatives picking up many traditional Labour seats in the so-called Red Wall, with the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn being defeated. So, are Labour now credible again? Could they win the next election? Could they get back into government? Well, joining me to discuss this is the former Director of Political Operations for Tony Blair, John McTernan. Good afternoon to you, John. Can we just reminisce for 1 second about 2019? What were your feelings when you watched that election? It was, even in historical context, a really difficult night for the Labour Party.
Yeah, it was a terrible night. There was only one silver lining, which was that Jeremy Corbyn would be unable to call it any kind of victory. Even though his supporters have since then tried to portray it as a great vote for socialism. It was the worst Labour result since 1935. And it did mark a turning point, because at that point, the majority of the Labour Party membership realised, and the unions realised, and the union members realised, Labour had to start to become credible again. A huge mountain to climb, but I think 2 years on, major success has been delivered by Keir Starmer's leadership.
I was saying, though, to Justin Madders, I don't know if you heard it, the Labour MP we had a little earlier, Labour are clearly doing well in the polls at the moment. It is midterm. Governments tend to slip in midterm, don't they? Shropshire will be an interesting by-election in a couple of days. But in many ways, it feels that this is the government stumbling rather than Labour necessarily taking massive leaps forward in terms of popular appeal. Is that fair to say, or am I being unfair on Her Majesty's opposition?
I think you're being unfair for two reasons. One is this isn't a normal midterm. There's never been a global pandemic midway through anybody's term in office. And secondly, the choice offered to the British public in 2019, I thought, was unfair to all voters. They were offered the choice of Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. And you have to look at both parties really hard and go, how could you guys ever have produced your people? We've now sorted that out. We've got Keir Starmer. The Tory party are now going, wait, we may have got a landslide because of this man. We may be about to suffer a massive turn away from us because of this guy. Because it is the Prime Minister, his victory, and now his problems. And the Tories can't save him from himself, because this is his party now. It's the Boris Johnson party, not the Conservative Party. That's why he's raising taxes, £3,000 a year on the average household by the end of this Parliament. So I do think what we've seen is the public decided Johnson, not Corbyn. And now the public are going, that didn't actually mean we want Johnson forever. You know, it's like it was a month ago, isn't it? He briefed the papers. He wants to do 10 years like Margaret Thatcher. Now it looks like he'd be lucky to do 10 months.
OK, and John, just very quickly and finally, you know, we look at where the opinion polls are now. You know, Labour are ahead. But in the end, the Conservatives got an 80-seat majority. I think it would take a bigger swing than even 97 for Labour to get back into power with their own majority. That is a mountain to climb that seems insurmountable, doesn't it?
The swing in the Old Bexley Sidcup by-election, which wasn't a great result for Labour, on that swing alone, Labour would be the largest single party in Parliament. So a minority Labour government is already within sight. The question is then at the margins. And I don't know anybody with relatives in a red wall seat won by the Conservatives, by Labour voters voting for Boris Johnson. I don't know any of them who think that the Christmas party shenanigans are anything other than a massive revelation about the character of the Prime Minister. And in the end, character is what gets you out of office. So I still hope that there may well be a majority, slim majority Labour government at the next election, but definitely a minority government is on the cards.
OK, John, really appreciate your thoughts and analysis. John McTernan there joining us with a very well-adorned bookshelf behind him. Thank you, John. Let's move on to travel, because it seems that the red list could well be scrapped as soon as this week. Of course, it was only introduced a couple of weeks ago. Given the emergence of the Omicron variant, thousands of travellers were forced into hotel quarantine at a cost of over £2,000 per person for 10 days. But just after a fortnight since it was introduced, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is said to have convinced colleagues it should be replaced with testing for the fully vaccinated, with data, of course, suggesting that the new variant is spreading quickly worldwide. What difference will all of this make? Well, here to discuss all of this is our travel journalist, Lisa Francesca Nans. Good afternoon to you, Lisa. I mean, this would be pretty extraordinary, quite a turnaround. The red list only came into place a couple of weeks ago.
Well, the red list has been in place for a long time, actually. What you're getting it confused with is the hotel quarantine. So the red list has been in for, 18 months now, possibly just under a year. And what they did was they emptied the red list. They said, we're keeping it there, but we're going to empty it. Then as soon as the new variant, any variants of concern became apparent, they quickly reinstated the red list and actually put some countries on it. There's, I think, 11 Southern African countries on it at the moment. And what the red list has always entailed is this hotel quarantine. It was just empty for a while, no hotel quarantine countries. Now they're saying that whether they will actually scrap the term red list or not is unsure. But what they're saying is they will possibly even by the end of the week, scrap this idea of hotel quarantine, which a lot of people have thought has been very restrictive, very difficult for anyone wanting to travel, and of course affecting, the economics of the situation, which is our industry and our travel industry.
Yeah, indeed. And I was meant to go away this weekend, but had to postpone it because of the new testing regime that's come into place. We have to essentially quarantine until you get a negative result, which clearly has a big impact if you just want to go for the weekend. It's not ideal. Is there any suggestion the government might move on that, particularly if you are fully vaccinated now with 3 jabs?
No suggestion that they might move on it at the moment, but just because there's no suggestion of it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The government now have form during this pandemic, and to give them, a sort of defence to a certain extent, this is new. They don't really know what they're doing. You're getting the impression that they're winging it, but no suggestion that that's going to happen at the moment. But just because there's no suggestion, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But I think you're absolutely right, and I speak to travel agents who are saying there's 0 new booking at the moment for January and February, because now we have to do the so-called day 2 PCR test and wait for the results to come back negative. You have to isolate at home. Now, the last time I did a so-called day 2 PCR test, it didn't turn up at my house until day 6. Okay, I chose the cheapest one out there, but not all of us can afford to spend 60, 70, 100, 150 quid on those rapid turnaround tests. And I chose the 20 quid one. It turned up at my house at day 6. Right now, that would mean that I had to isolate for 8 days. No work, no school, no going out the house at all. So that is very prohibitive for a lot of people wanting to travel. And it's exactly what you just said. The reason you're not travelling, that's the reason a lot of people aren't travelling. Also that, and the reintroduction of the departure test. The departure test is the one you have to take in the foreign country before flying back here. at the very great risk that you might test positive when you're there and have to spend 10, 11 days in a hotel in Greece or Spain or wherever you are.
Yeah, indeed. And you're right in saying that either it just becomes economically unviable because you're spending so much money on tests, or it's that concern, the uncertainty that means that you might not go ahead. Lisa, appreciate your thoughts, and we'll get you back on hopefully when those rules change, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to Grant Shapps and get some clarity at some stage as well. Thank you for joining us. That's Lisa, Francesca Nand. Clearly not abroad, but in very dark London as the nights draw in. OK, well, let's move on and finally end the programme on working from home, because our reporter Kevin Larkin has been looking at the new guidance that came into force today. We know that rail transport across the country down 20% compared to this time last week. The Tube in London also seeing fewer people getting on trains. But while you're told you can't go to work, or you shouldn't go to work, if you don't have to, you can apparently go to a work Christmas party. Kevin Larkin explains all the details.
Well, of course, today is the day the government's work from home mandate comes into effect. 47% of the country was able to work at home, according to the Office for National Statistics. That's their data from April 2020. But of course, that means 53% of the economy and workers did not work from home. And the number is even lower. Here in Yorkshire, it's just 37% who were able to work from home. Now, that's because we have fewer office jobs up here, more manufacturing and more key workers as well, people who have to be out working during the pandemic. Potentially, this could mean we see a faster rise in cases here in Yorkshire because obviously that working from home mandate will have less of an effect. And we saw this last year when many of those businesses which had to continue during the pandemic saw outbreaks of cases. We saw outbreaks at meat processing plants and bed factories, for example. So we are anticipating that most manufacturing industries will continue as normal with these new Plan B rules. A new survey from Make UK out today suggests that manufacturing is actually doing very well at the moment. Total manufacturing orders here in Yorkshire have increased by 38%, and that's a historically strong performance. Now, that's being put down to the reopening of the food and drink sector, as well as the demand for steel. Where I am at the moment, Rotherham and Sheffield is very much steel country, and that steel is being used for infrastructure projects, not just here in the UK, but around the world as well. But there are concerns about the cost pressures of this demand globally that's being released as the pandemic eased, and that the cost pressures on materials and supply of labour and so on could push prices up. But so far, the outlook for 2022 is looking very positive. But of course, all eyes are on the Omicron variant to see how that could impact on things. Now, the UK Health Security Agency said there were 1,239 new Omicron cases in the UK yesterday, which makes up almost 4 in 10 of the total number of Omicron cases we've seen in the UK as a whole. So far, we've seen just over 3,000 Omicron cases in the UK. But it's important to know that Omicron is still a small proportion of the total number of coronavirus cases. Yesterday we saw 48,000 coronavirus cases nationally, so Omicron makes up around 1 in 16 cases. The number of patients being admitted to hospital is still relatively low, 839 yesterday. That is the highest for a month, but it's far below the peak we saw last January of just over 4,000. Similarly, the number of deaths within 28 days of a positive COVID test also remains low at the moment. The last complete data for the 5th of December saw 107 deaths. Again, that's much lower than the 1,300 we saw at the peak last January. But of course, hospitalisations and deaths are what they call lagging indicators. So first of all, we see that rise in cases, then that feeds through to hospitalisations and deaths, and that's what the government is so concerned about. And of course, this government concern is not necessarily shared by all Conservatives. Many Conservative MPs want to wait until we know exactly how bad the Omicron variant is before bringing in these Plan B measures. As of last night, 67 Conservatives had confirmed they were going to vote against the plans, meaning the government will have to rely on Labour to get the Plan B measures through. Now, Labour have said they will back that, so these Plan B measures will be coming into force when MPs vote tomorrow. However, they may come at a very high price for the Prime Minister's relationship with his own party.
about the work from home and indeed everything else that's coming into play this week with Plan B. Lots of you getting in touch. John says, why are Labour not offering an alternative? I'm sick of the Tories and the double standards, but I'm not convinced Starmer is any different. Nikki says, I really hope they ditch the red list. Christmas is so important. It's not a holiday. It's essential for families to get together. And Sam says, I don't trust Labour. Never have, never will. The extra support they have now is just because the Tories are so bad. OK, that is it from me for now. We're just hearing in the last couple of minutes that actually there are going to be 77 rebels at least against that passport vote tomorrow. We'll have coverage of that throughout the day here on GB News. Up next, it's the afternoon agenda with Alex. But first, here's the weather from the Met Office. I'll see you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Tomorrow will bring a dry day for much of the UK, but there will be more wet and windy weather in the northwest and some fairly damp and dank conditions at times across the south. There's a wriggling, waving weather front sitting across the UK at the moment. That is going to slip to the south as we go through the night, allowing things to turn a bit drier across northwest England and Wales, where it's still pretty soggy through much of this evening. But that rain, as I say, will be edging south, so turning damp across South Wales and the Midlands through the evening. Much of the far south just staying cloudy and maybe a little misty. And then that next area of rain coming into the northwest, with the winds picking up as well during the early hours. Well, we've got the clearest skies. We could certainly see some pockets of frost over eastern Scotland, northern England in rural areas, but most towns and cities staying above freezing. On to Tuesday, and we're going to be fairly glum over the Midlands, South Wales early on. The remnants of that weather front still providing some drizzle. Could be misty and murky with drizzle at times along the south coast. Brighter skies for northwest England compared to today. Rain at times for western Scotland. Some very wet and windy weather across the far north. But northeast Scotland seeing a bit of sunshine. Northeast England bright enough, along with Northern Ireland. Temperatures mostly a touch above average, certainly pretty mild again across the far south. So to tomorrow evening, that rain in the northwest will pep up and slip a little further south, so turning pretty soggy through the central belt and Northern Ireland as we head into Wednesday. Patchy rain too for northwest England, but again across the south, although it may stay fairly glum, most places will be dry, and I'm a bit more optimistic for some brighter skies across eastern England, maybe the North Midlands during Wednesday, but a sunshine and a brighter day in the far north with those winds easing down. Now, the winds are going to ease down for all of us over the next few days. Heading into the weekend, high pressure is moving in, so things turning drier, but it could also mean some problems with stubborn fog patches.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing at 9 a.m. The stories, opinions, debate and analysis that you need to hear.
You're quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Don't forget The Briefing, 9 a.m. Monday to Friday here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello everyone and welcome to the afternoon agenda with me, Patrick Christie, standing in for Alex Phillips. Now this show is all about your opinion, a little bit of mine as well, of course. So with that in mind, here's what we'll be covering today. The cost of living is pushed up yet again by a record increase in the prices at the factory gate. How will customers cope with rising prices? Working from home is back as well, which means you don't have to put pants on anymore. How do you dodge the isolation blues? And of course, the epic weight gain, if you're anything like me. Anyway, so many of us, of course, experienced that last time around. And today, we need to talk about the vaccine rollout. I'm asking, is the booster programme a silver bullet against COVID? That's the agenda for the next hour. But what's on yours? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or, of course, tweet me at GBNews as well. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Hello there, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and this is your news at 4 o'clock. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of the coronavirus in the UK. Early this morning, the government announced that around 10 people in England were hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
And we are expecting a statement from the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, very shortly from the House of Commons. When that happens, we will, of course, bring it to you.